All right, so welcome everybody to one of our many local author talks that we're going to be having this year online via Zoom. My name is Jack Sanchez. I'm one of the library services managers at the Whittier Public Library. Thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the Whittier Public Library Foundation for sponsoring this event. The author that we will be listening to today is the author of It Was a Beautiful Day When My Father Died. It's a personal work of the emotional and mental health benefits from forgiveness. Octavio shares his knowledge of leadership and personal development skills with people throughout the US and around the world. He has addressed audiences and conducted seminars for businesses, colleges, churches, and non-governmental organizations in Norway, Ecuador, India, Italy, Germany, and Tajikistan. So we're delighted to read his book and know that he's a Whittier local author. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Octavio Cesar Martinez.
Wow, but yeah, well, thank you. And thanks for being here this evening. I hope to make the time with us together valuable for all of you. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to give a quick summary of the book, and here's what it looks like. And then I'm going to give a short presentation on why we don't forgive. It'll be a few minutes only. But after that, I want to make this your talk. And so if you want to, please ask questions, maybe regarding the book if you've read it, the presentation that I'm about to give, or specific situations regarding forgiveness. I have a repeat offender in my life. There's a broken relationship, things about trust. As I mentioned in the book, and also you'll see this on my Instagram, which has been sort of now shifted for the last 3 or 4 months about forgiveness. I think there's a lot of confusion regarding what forgiveness is, what it's not, how to do it. What do you do in situations when you have someone very close to you? Does it mean that you automatically have to put them back into your life? That sort of thing. So that's what I'm addressing. Now, the book is very personal. It's anecdotal, but I use my story as the vehicle to carry the message and to carry the concepts of forgiveness. So in my book, I do discuss, as I mentioned, what forgiveness is, what it's not, how to forgive. And I mean, I am a religious person, so a lot of that's in the story, but you do not have to be a religious person to benefit from the practice and the therapeutic benefit of forgiving and learning the art of forgiveness and practicing forgiveness. I also made it a point to have my manuscript, before it was published, reviewed by a couple of therapists. So I didn't want to violate any particular known principle. So, there's that. If some of you are wondering, well, are you a doctor? No, I'm not. So let me go ahead and answer that question. So before I get any further, let me go ahead and start the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and, for a moment here, get the screen shared, and you're going to see a blue screen. Should be here in a second. And okay, great. So all of you, just by nodding, you can see a blue screen in front of you. Okay, good. All right, let me go ahead and start with this particular remarks. I believe, especially in the West, that we all love the idea of forgiveness. We love the idea of forgiveness until you have to forgive somebody. Then all bets are off. In my book, I discuss why we should, how we can, that sort of thing. And even if people agree that, yes, I think that's a good idea, I think that aligns itself with my religious views, I recognize the mental, spiritual, and emotional benefits of forgiving, but we don't do it. Now, this presentation implies that there's a intentional, conscious refusal to forgive. But there's also, at times, people are not aware why they're withholding forgiveness. And I hope that this will perhaps maybe scratch or push into that bruised area in our lives to think about that. Second thing is this, and this is going to be the main theme of everything that I've done most of my life, this book and the work that I'm doing now with forgiveness. I'm convinced that everything's relational, from politics to our churches, in business, everything's relational. In fact, if you think about it, you probably do business with people that they're not the cheapest. They may not even be close by, but you just like them. And perhaps the organizations you're part of, when you think about it, you're there maybe because you believe in what the goals are of that organization, but you're also there, I'm going to suggest, because of the people that you're connected to. So this is a main principle that guides a lot of the work I've done, that everything in the end is relational. But now let's get to this. What are the three rights which keep us from forgiving? And these rights, I say that sort of tongue-in-cheek, they are hurdles, they are barriers, but they are oddly, I think we hold on to them as the rights that I have in a relationship that keep me from forgiving the offender, and they're harmful. So here's the first one that we have to give up if we're going to forgive. The right to get even. I think there's nothing more luxurious in a very sick way than this right to get even. I mean, this is where we may not physically harm somebody, but we think about it, or we give smart-ass answers. It's the silent treatment to our spouse, or we withhold intimacy. It is the emotional withdrawal from a team or a board meeting. We're trying to get back at the person that offended us. If you hang on to this right, you will not be able to forgive that offender, and you will not begin to restore yourself. This is not about letting somebody else off the hook, except you. When you forgive somebody, you let yourself off the hook of bitterness. That's the first right you have to give up, the right to get even. But here's the second one. Now, this may be more common in some church circles, but it happens everywhere. This is the kind of right where someone will say or think, I can't believe you did that to me. Or I would have never done that to you. And this is a kind of a weird, twisted way of you don't get even, but you try to at least ameliorate the pain and the hurt by feeling morally superior to your offender. The thing is that if there is one idea, I think, that is proven over and over again, is that people can be pretty horrible to each other. And the other idea that I hold to is that under the right circumstances, we're sometimes capable of being our worst selves. As Abraham Lincoln once talked about, we have a dark and a better angel. And he was appealing, of course, to the better angels in ourselves, and in terms of restoring peace after the Civil War. But I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all know that, we're capable of doing some dastardly things. We can feel, say. So one way to begin to heal a relationship and to forgive them is to recognize I'm maybe no better. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a very broad statement here. I'm convinced that every offense and every offender can be categorized under weakness or ignorance. So, for example, somebody does something pretty stupid, horrific maybe. Wow, they should have known better. Yeah, they should have, so they were ignorant. Or they knew better than that. Okay, they did, so they were weak. And if you look at your own failures in a relationship, or times when you didn't live up to your own personal moral code, if you examine it, it'll fall under an idea of weakness or ignorance. And once you accept that part of our humanity, that the species is broken and we all suffer from weakness and we all suffer from ignorance, then you recognize we're all in the same boat. And forgiveness is perhaps a little easier to approach. Now, this last one may be the most controversial, but it needs to be shared anyways. There is also a kind of a sick, twisted pleasure in being a victim. Now, in our current culture, we talk about certain groups having a privilege. I'm going to suggest that being a victim has one as well. Because when I have a victim status, oddly, it allows me certain rights, certain passes. and I'm going to explain one of them. First, let me give you a general idea about human behavior. Everybody believes they're right. And there were times I would have a conversation regarding my particular belief codes, and I'm approaching it with logic or the tools of philosophy. I have a degree in philosophy, maybe talking about a history. In other words, I'm using everything but my feelings to explain why I hold a certain belief. The person will respond with not addressing any of the issues I brought up, but try to be dismissive of everything I said by saying, oh, you just think you're right, which is not saying anything, because we all think we're right. The terrorist thinks they're right. Our Republican friends think they're right. The Democrats think they're right. The Jewish state thinks they're right. The Palestinian state thinks they're right. So when you say, or someone says to you, you just think you're right, nothing has really been said. Now back to this idea about victimhood. There is a reason why all of us behave the way we do. There's a payoff. A therapist, psychologist, priest, pastors will explain that we hold on to a particular pattern of behavior because there's a payoff to us, even if it's an unhealthy one. And being a victim has an unhealthy payoff. So for example, here's what I mean. And I've come across this often back in the days when I would counsel people. Sometimes I would have to address a person's unhealthy habit or behavior. And the response would be, well, you don't know what it's like to be then the victim title, the adult child of an alcoholic, an abused spouse, or whatever it might be. Now, that's very true. I don't know many different types of victimhoods, but I do know what it's like to be a healthy human being. And you, sir, you, madam, are not able or willing to become one. It reminds me of, if you were a Star Trek fan, or maybe you've ever seen the show, the Star Trek, the USS Enterprise would be flying through space and they would come under attack from another spaceship. And Captain Kirk would say, shields up, to protect the ship from being hit with missiles. And that's what victimhood does. It's almost like putting up shields to protect any sort of truth bomb from coming in. When I give up the right to be a victim, like this person did this to me, my husband left me, my business partner was, this is why I'm not able to move forward. Yeah, well, that's not helping you. And until you release that victimhood through forgiveness, or release victimhood to forgive the other person, you're going to be stuck in that spiral. And you're allowing your offender to live rent-free in your head, to no benefit to you. Finally, let me go ahead and close with this. Here we go. If you want more conversation along this way and you want it for free, okay, you can have it. There will be 3 free booklets available, and so we'll figure out how to get this. I think my email address is on there right now. Hold off before you send that, because we might be able to do it through another method. But the 3 free booklets were actually available for you when you registered. You can download them. They are shareable, they are printable, they are a gift to you. The first 2, How to Forgive and How to Apologize, are part of in the book. It's drawn from material. But the last one, Why We Don't Forgive, is all new material in developing. It's kind of a short presentation that I just gave you. Also, you could follow me on Instagram and see a bit more. There were daily ideas and quotes and prompts, questions regarding forgiveness, and that's there on Instagram under my handle of Do Good and Dress Well. And then finally, thank you for your attention to this particular presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then we're going to take your questions and go from there. Okay, we're all back. Oh, thank you. That silent applause, I'll take it.
I am going to put the link to our website where the PDFs are, and if anybody wants me to send them to them, I'll put my email address on there as well. And I've made it so that anybody can unmute yourself. So if you have a question.
You actually also, on Zoom, your keyboard, if you press your space bar, it'll act like a, kind of like a walkie-talkie. When you press it down, you're unmuted. When you release it, you're muted again, just to let you know.
All right.
So if there's a question or a comment, in fact, if you disagree with me, that's even more interesting. Those kind of conversations, please feel free.
Hey, Octavio. Joe Vinatieri here.
Hi, Joe.
Great presentation, and enjoyed your book. So the thing that was so intriguing for me was, and I know you kind of talked about it, but maybe there's some others who haven't heard it. How did you come up with the name for your book?
Oh, yeah. So it's what's funny is, I'll say this, you can tell a person's relational status with their own fathers by how they respond to the title. Mm-hmm. Because I had one woman say, "Oh, so you had this very beautiful moment with your dad when he passed away." No, no, I did not.
You didn't read the book.
Yeah, you have not read the book, apparently. So on the first thing is that it wasn't until my father died that the turn and the pivot towards forgiveness occurred. I mean, I'm in my late 40s. I was starting to pastor. So it was good that he died for that reason. That's when the pivot began. The other thing is, to be fully honest, I mean, because it's in the book, when the day that he died, I was actually glad. Like, oh, good, finally. He's gone. Fine, I don't have to deal with that idiot anymore. The other thing is that it happened to be a beautiful day. It was in the low 70s. It was in the summer. The sky was blue, unlike today. Nice wind, beautiful puffy white clouds. So all three of them were true on the day that he died. It was an actual lovely day and weather-wise. At the time, I was glad that he died. I was like, oh, good, finally. But the most important one is that's when the pivot began for me, where I was able to finally, well, two things, embarrassingly. I actually began to really practice my faith as in forgiving, and then was healed and released on a completely different level that I didn't even know was damaged by forgiving my father.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. I'm curious, how does this hit somebody? Do you find any of you find yourself thinking, yeah, I don't know if I could maybe do that. There's a certain situation. How does this idea of forgiveness hit some of you?
Let's see. I really like the presentation that you just gave about forgiveness, because I never thought about actually forgiving people in the moment. So you discussed, now I'm drawing a blank because.
You mean the giving one or the?
You discussed like not wanting to get back at someone. And sometimes in a conversation, you want to get back at someone.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess before your presentation, I thought about forgiveness more like the way you talk about in your book, like forgiving your father for years of stuff. But mm-hmm. in a short conversation, I guess, I never thought about like instant forgiveness. Like, I forgive you for what you just said, and I'm going to wait, and I'm not going to be a victim in this moment. And so I was impressed with that part.
A good friend of mine, Adrian Keller, he's got a thriving, amazing life coach business, Take New Ground. And he and I were having a conversation just recently about some of the like short little, bumping of heads that occur. He made a statement, and I thought, boy, I wish I would have heard this years ago, and that is, you don't have to accept every invitation to a fight. And my response was, well, if they invited me, it seems rude to turn it down. But I mean, think about this. When you're on, let's just go to the typical being cut off on the freeway.
Mm-hmm.
Now, unintentionally, maybe, you just were invited into a fight.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple things that can happen. You could, you could ignore the driver because you don't, we're older now and you don't want to play those stupid games. But see, there's a part of that stays residual,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a low level anger or resentment. And then later you find yourself blowing up or someone says to you, gosh, why did you get so mad? This was nothing. I'm going to suggest that there's a buildup.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I think forgiveness, even if you're not even certain, I think one should consider that maybe even saying it out loud may seem corny.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, pretentious Mercedes driver, I forgive you, man. And, God bless you. Hope you get to where you're going safely.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a family. You probably have people that care about you, even though I don't know why at this moment. But it's just it's a habit. It's almost like I was telling this to a friend. It's like a mental, emotional, and spiritual laxative. It just gets rid of the junk, gets rid of the junk. Yeah. But yeah, instant and long term. And it can be painful to perhaps go back and process events in our life that were difficult. I've had a few people contact me from reading the book saying this thing occurred 15 years ago and it was pretty bad. And, or this happened, I did something for, many years that, why did I let that happen? Why did I let that person dominate me that way? So it can be painful, but I'm going to suggest that every healing is painful.
Mm-hmm.
Can be. And, but then you're free and you're healed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like going to the dentist, but I've had too many teeth replaced now to put that off anymore. So go get healed through forgiveness.
I enjoyed your presentation very much, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I found that the Serenity Prayer, the older I became, the more it meant. And I do recall a number of days going to work, to school. I was a school principal, and knowing that I had a staff meeting come up, and a couple of folks I knew for sure were going to, whatever was presented, I knew they were against it.
They're going to fight you, sure.
Rather verbally so. And I think I would say that prayer probably 15 times by the time I got over the hill, to school. And it really helped. I'd say it, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Boy,
and
that last part is so important, right?
That was the key. It's the wisdom to know the difference. Because, and I think the older I became, the more mature. I don't know how mature one has to be, but I think that helped me the most. And then being able to understand what goes around comes around, just trite phrases. And if I backed off of my frustration or anger in a situation, whatever it was, I mean, my anger wouldn't have solved it. My frustration wouldn't have solved it. My intervening would not have solved it. It would have just aggravated it even more. And to be able to see that situation eventually coming around where the other person, it's not getting even because I had nothing to do with it. But I realized in time, they also would face some major frustrations, some major, whatever it was, that no one gets out free. No one gets,
No, that's a very good point. And I see that you must be Doug, and you are. I cracked that code, by the way. I should have been a detective. Who are you, madam?
Susan, he wants to know your
Oh,
name.
I'm Susan.
Hi, Susan. So, Susan, here's the other thing that happens with the whole get even thing that we hang on to. First of all, I think we diminish ourselves. We diminish our character. We diminish our souls by replaying those things in our mind, even if we never act on them. It's not exercising the muscle of kindness or compassion or empathy. It's diminishing that. But let's say you act on it. And since you mentioned something that I do believe in, again, I'm kind of a Bible guy, so I would point to a God that holds all of us, I guess, accountable for our behavior. But let's just say there's a moral universe. Well, if what goes around comes around, so does my stupidity.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I think I'm evening the scales of justice, when I act out in a unkind, unempathetic, uncompassionate manner to get even, I've just now released the universe to pay me back for that. I did that before for a few decades, and it didn't work out too well. So the best safeguard to my own mental and emotional, spiritual health is forgiveness. And hopefully the person that was being difficult will learn their lessons. But I do want to address a question here for a guy from Sean. He mentions he's driving. He says, you mentioned a couple of times being a healthy human as a goal in forgiveness. Can you expound on what that looks like and what the lack of forgiveness can do to affect a person's healthy mind and emotions? Yeah. This is not a cure-all. I don't think a lack of forgiveness is everybody's problem, but it's most people's. So I'm going to give some broad brush strokes in this. A lack of forgiveness leading to bitterness, I think, chokes off creative energy. I think you begin to mistrust or have particular wounds that you bring into a healthy relationship. I think you see that pattern of people that have a fairly predictable expiration date on their ability to hold down a job, not because they're not talented, but because eventually, I don't care what organization you work with, you're going to bump heads with somebody. And if you're not able to forgive them and use some relational skills to move past that, either you will be released to go discover God's will for your life, or you'll walk away. And I think there's also evident in expiration dates on relationships. Like, for example, a couple can be married legally, but emotionally completely disconnected because of a lack of forgiveness. So that's what I think unhealthy it looks like. In a healthy way, at the risk of sounding sort of Pollyannish, there's a particular joy and energy and happiness that I have because I'm not weighed down with all that garbage. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Let's go back to the one most people probably have experienced, being cut off on the freeway or streets here. How many times have you gone to work or arrived at the place you're trying to get to, and you're kind of still riled up, and someone says, "What's wrong?" "Oh, the idiot cut me off," whatever. Well, and maybe you've seen people say that to you when they come in a little bit angry or frustrated. Those things have an accumulation. They don't just go away. Time doesn't necessarily minimize that. It just sits there unnoticed, but it's adding up. And because it's gradual, there's a newer and newer baseline. Let me give you another metaphor. When I first moved into the house I live in right here, I discovered how clumsy I was. I ended up in the hospital 3 times because of 4 different injuries doing stuff in my house that resulted in broken bones and stitches. No joke. What I discovered about that time is, number 1, I'm very clumsy. But number 2, even an invisible wound like a strain or a broken bone, when you bump, if you try to use it in the normal way, you realize, oh, I got a pain. like a sprained ankle or a pulled muscle. In many ways, people emotionally and relationally are wounded. A parent, a spouse, a coach that said something really nasty and harsh to somebody. And because it's invisible and may not even be aware of themselves, when you press it accidentally and you bump up against it, there's a blow up. Or some people's anger and sadness is manifested by withdrawing what appears to be introversion. That wound has not been dealt with. It's not been treated. And one way I suggest that can be done is forgiveness. So that's how I think healthy and unhealthy people are in with regards to forgiveness. Did that raise any more questions or answer a few?
So are you saying that it's better to react or respond, not necessarily outside of your car or with any hand gestures, anger or frustration when you're driving, but to rather maybe do a little name calling or something like that and get rid of
maybe
that
what?
name calling,
Mm-hmm.
well, you stupid head or whatever you want to say,
That's not what you say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, she was obviously a school principal. Stupid head. Well, have you ever seen somebody when they're first learning a new habit? It's very intentional. Let's just say the piano. It's da, B, C, D, D. They actually sometimes are verbally sounding it out. And then when they're more comfortable, there's a bit more, you can tell they're maybe not speaking or sounding it out, but they're just playing a bit more naturally. Then there's the virtuoso, who is playing pieces by memory, looking at the audience, engaged, and just enjoying the moment. It seems effortless what they're doing. It makes you think, I can play the piano, because they make it seem so effortless. Forgiveness works in the same way. It's an art, it's a practice, and it's a habit. But the first few times may feel awkward and clumsy. And that's why I suggested at first, sometimes you just have to say it. Okay, crazy lady at Starbucks, I forgive you. Help me. But let's say you're a person of prayer. It could be, God, I rather not forgive this person, but it's in alignment with what you taught me to do. So help me to do it sincerely. But I wish you the best, and I'm going to pray a blessing over your life. Let's say you're not a religious person, then you would be more of the articulating, I'm releasing this, I'm going to forgive this person. And if I'm reminded about this again, I'm going to say these words again. I forgive you and I release you, sir. Then you may find that you're on the steering wheel. Somebody does something stupid. You go, wow, okay, I forgive you, man. Oof, okay. Then all of a sudden you recognize that you're not upset at all anymore. I can remember a time. By the way, when your spouse notices a change of behavior, you've changed, right? Because they're the last ones to see it. When my wife said, you're not getting upset anymore at all at these people who are driving. Wow, felt pretty good about myself. Yeah, I'm not, but at first it was an intentional, awkward, verbal thing I did. Then it got to be just maybe more of a mental thing. And then finally, in that one area of my life, I was free. And it was now part of me. In alignment with that, let me just add one more thing. Please remember that we're not equal as individuals. For example, you could be very courageous in a particular area of your life and maybe a bit hesitant, cowardly in another. You could be very empathetic towards people in a certain environment, a certain type of situation, and possibly even cruel in another. It works almost like faith. You can believe something a certain way, but And when it comes to maybe our kids and family, like, oh, I don't know, So all that to say is that our health, even like our illnesses, mental, emotional, and spiritual, they're not even. So when you find yourself being able to forgive easily in one situation and then maybe fall short in another, give yourself a break and recognize it's not even. We're stronger and weak in areas of our life. And one strength, unfortunately, it would be great if it did, one virtue, one strength does not carry over to all areas of our lives without intentional application. How did that hit you? Anybody have a comment regarding that?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Norma, I can.
Oh, yes.
Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, my pleasure. I just ran across it on the email yesterday, I guess. And I haven't read your book, but I decided that
That case, I'm sorry, I'm not going to answer your question. Only paying customers.
Well, I haven't read it yet.
Okay, good.
Oh, good. I'm a teacher too, so.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice.
So anyway, I like what you've presented so far and how many levels you cover, because I liked Jack's input about forgiving like in the moment, she said. And I think a lot of times we think about forgiveness for something in the past. So and then you brought up, as you were talking with Susan, the principal, like forgiving for in the immediate future if somebody does cut you off on the freeway.
Okay.
We're kind of always waiting. We're always ready to forgive or something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know exactly what I'm formulating in my mind, but it sounds to me like it's sort of becomes a habit of mind, so that whatever is thrown at us.
Yes. Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay, that we
That's
have,
exactly what I'm suggesting.
okay, that we have a way, a protocol, so to speak, even though it's not.
Yeah, that's even better. A protocol.
That we respond in a particular way to the person that cuts us off, or to the person that, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff,
Yes, there is.
So anyway, so it's very broad what you're presenting, and what I'm hearing from the participants in the Zoom meeting is that it has broad applications, both the past and then the present, and then in the immediate future, if I'm thinking about, my habits of mind, and how I rearrange myself, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's such a good observation. In fact, I guess there's two things running through my head: that forgiveness is at first awkward, then possible, and then finally effortless. But that is almost every new learned skill. And I'm going to suggest that forgiveness is a skill set. And I believe the reason why there is such confusion about it is that it's been taught incorrectly. And let me take a step back. I'm not saying that I'm the first guy that's going to bring clarity on forgiveness. I absolutely draw on people's work. Dr. Miramar from UCLA, the psychologist. There's quotes in there from a Sufi mystic, movies, of course, the scriptures. But my point is that it's not been maybe broken down as I needed it broken down to understand it. There's not just one size fits all forgiveness. There's different types, and let's say even under an idea of whatever. Let me give you this forgiveness idea. The idea of forgive and watch, which I mentioned in the book. I suggest that if the person violated, betrayed, stole, whatever act of dishonesty, whatever happened, to as far as large as a betrayal in a marriage, you forgive that person for your own sake, so that you don't have this bitterness or rancor or resentment that's going to grow. I guarantee it, by the way, that kind of thing doesn't die. It may fester and not pop its ugly head up for a while, but it's there. But that doesn't mean just because you forgave that person that you automatically restore the relationship as it once was. There are different types of forgivenesses, but not a single one of them automatically makes the offender a better person. And so people have at times thought, well, I forgave them, I'm supposed to trust them again. No, you're not. That, you know, you got fooled once, shame on them. If they're going to fool you a second time, that's on you now. And that's where forgive and watch means I forgive them for my mental, spiritual, emotional health. But then I watch to see if they can be trusted again. Forgiveness has to do with the past. Trust, especially once it's been broken, has to be re-earned and deals with the future. And finally, at least in response to your comments, not finally for tonight, there's a great practice that I don't always follow well, but you know, it's an evening thing of just reviewing your day. How did I do? Did I live up to my own moral code? And what's often surprising is to recognize how often we just forget things that we did when we weren't at our best. And we forget things that people did to us when we weren't at our best. But when you allow yourself 5-10 minutes at the end of the day to say, you know, did I? You can go through a list of questions. Was I patient? Was I empathetic? Did I act in a generous manner? Or maybe you have a different way of reviewing it. But the daily review in the evening before we retire has a way of making sure things don't fester. They don't come up to where they're a big thing in the past that may require more significant work to deal with. So, but yeah, it's definitely immediate, it's daily, and it's also a future thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thank you. And Norma, you brought up a good point, and I wanted to just let everyone know that Octavio has given us 5 books to raffle. So if you haven't read the book, you can read it and you can participate in this raffle. There's 14 people on this Zoom call. So if you want to participate, just put your name in the chat and we'll contact you.
Yeah, so it's a pure raffle. It's not first come, first serve. And after the winners are determined, I think the book's going to be signed by the author and dedicated to your personal life. So we can.
We'll have to ask him.
Well, yeah, depending on the mood, he may not be in the mood for that. But let's see here. There's a question here. Do you think the path of forgiveness is one that must be self-initiated versus initiated by others encouraging it for it to be truly transformational? How do you get past being just the encourager for those who deeply scarred by lack of forgiveness? Oh, okay. Well, Heidi, both. So on one of my posts on Instagram, I did kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It said, "How often am I supposed to forgive?" And then my response is, "How often do you go to the bathroom?" And the answer was, every time I need to.
Yeah.
Whenever you need to get rid of crap, you know. So if it's not self-initiated, and we have blind spots, that's why it's great to be part of having friends, whether it's a church community or perhaps colleagues at work, educators, people that care about you enough for you to become angry with them. When they speak into your life, it's something like, hey, Norma, you know, lately I've noticed you're not yourself. You know, it seems like you have this thing with so-and-so. It's, you know, yeah, be grateful for a friend who's willing to call you out when you're not at your best. And I've certainly absolutely have benefited from those men in my life. But let's say it's self-initiated. You know, you're going through your daily or weekly review of your life, or however you're doing this, or perhaps maybe in a moment, an aha moment. It's in prayer, or it's just, you know, you're walking and you realize, boy, I was kind of a jerk the other day. Take the initiative on your own. So whether it's self or brought to you, both can be absolutely transformational. As far as it being, how do you get past being just an encourager? Oh, you can't. You can't. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you. You know, if there was a way to force health on people, somebody would have discovered it by now. But you know, I have a list of people that you can't help, that you cannot help. But the first person on that list is the one that doesn't want to be helped. Period. And those of us who are parents have lived through that nightmare. We see our kids do stupid things. And, you know, you can encourage, you can create the environment. But sometimes, and I wish this wasn't true, sometimes when you see the train wreck that's about to come, the only thing you can do is be ready to give triage when the wreck finally hits. And it's, shoot, I'm going to get emotional here. It's not pleasant when you see someone acting out in a very unhealthy manner, physically with narcotics or relationally with a flexible sexual morality or whatever it might be. But you can love someone. You can let them know that I have nothing but love for you. There's no judgment here. I just want you to be well. But in the end, the person chooses to take the help or not. And that's just the unfortunate reality of our species. So you can encourage them. And I would say that if you have a tradition of praying for people, then you pray for them.
So are you saying that, are we muted?
No, I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So what I'm hearing is that forgiveness can be public and it can also be personal or internal.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would say that in many cases that the private internal is as important, or maybe most important. Part of the relational dynamic that I think is critical is protecting the dignity or privacy of the other. And sometimes, see, I'm thinking back, people who did this for me, they covered my stupidity with a curtain of charity. They covered my failures with the curtain of kindness and forgave me. What they did not do was put it out there. And I'm not saying that you would, but it's just that often what builds up is stuff privately. And so if I'm able to privately release, get rid of, forgive, and experience the healing of forgiveness, then I'm in a healthier place to determine how I'm going to respond and relate to that offender. Do they come back into my life? Maybe. If what they did was something that was maybe not their responsibility, they didn't know, they're sincerely sorry for it, there's good reason to believe they're not going to do it again, well, then I'm going to probably deal with them differently than the person who is not taking any ownership for the offense they gave. And but I want to stress that forgiveness, first and foremost, is primarily for the offended, for the one that's been wounded, for the one that's been hurt. It's first for you. You're strengthening and healing yourself when you learn to forgive others.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. Sometimes the train wreck needs to happen for someone. Yeah, it does. Sometimes the train wreck needs to happen for someone to ask for help. Yep, agreed. And, you know, I take no pleasure in people getting to that place. It's, you know, I had to get there, and it's not fun. And, you know, like I mentioned in the book, I mean, the things that happened to me, I wouldn't wish on anybody else, but they made me who I am. And yeah. You know what? I'll say this, because there's one person here, and I won't share who that is to embarrass them, but that man showed me more forgiveness than most people I know. And his kindness, his empathy, his willingness to walk with me out of some confusion restored a lot. But you know, two people can't move forward unless they're both willing to go to the same direction. You know, there's an old ancient prophet, Middle Eastern, that says this kind of thing. You know, can two people walk together unless they both agree to? And so, yeah, there's private forgiveness, which I think is the most often that you're going to be doing. And the public ones are necessary. I would say this, Susan, when the person has been given the scarlet letter. You know, when someone has failed financially, morally, in a very colossal public manner, and you're involved in that whole mess, I think it's an act of kindness in saying, not only do I forgive this person, but I respect or love this person, whatever the language is appropriate for the setting. And I want to welcome them back into our community. I want to welcome them back into our organization. Now, that doesn't mean that they get restored perhaps all their previous benefits and responsibilities. It could, but I think that's probably that would be the only time that something public has to go on, when it's for the sake of restoring somebody. Then, not showing you how magnanimous you are. You know, how do I help this person get well? If it's a private thing, great. But if it's a public thing, let's do that. It's pretty quiet out there. I'm not sure if that's the silence of disagreement or you've been wowed into silence. What's going on over there, Doug? What's going? I can't hear anything.
No, I'm fine. I'm just listening and enjoying it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All righty. Is there? We're coming up on the hour. Is there any last minute questions or observations that perhaps I can address? Or
I've really enjoyed your talk. I
thank you.
have, and I'm anxious to read your material, your book, and and your pamphlets. And you know, at this point, I'm dying to share them, but I guess I better read them first.
All right. Well, I'll turn that back over to Jack and have
Okay.
finish it off.
I do have one question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Not Rio. God. Oh, I'm not muted. This is my dear friend Rio. How are you, honey?
Oh, good. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. You and I had a chance to connect once since I've read the book. One of the things that I did touch on at the time was your intros to every chapter. I don't know what you prefaces to every chapter, like your little
Oh, the quotes.
The quotes, say a prayer, or the quotes.
Mhm.
My question at this particular time is, how did those come about to be added to the book?
Yeah, I bet you use them. Well, as you may recall, we were part of the same church for a while. This book was the result of a sermon talk that I once gave. That was half hour, 25 minutes talk about forgiving, and it was always a subject that interested me. And so whenever I saw or read a quote from a film, a movie, someone else's speech on forgiveness, it stuck. And I collected them. I have pages of forgiveness quotes. So if you read my Instagram, you think, wow, this guy's really amazing. No, I just read a lot. But that's how they were chosen. Yes, I did preach at a specific church back in the day. It was a non-denominational church here in Whittier. I haven't worked there in 5 years, but it was a church in Whittier. Yeah. However, if you're interested, they're free and worth every penny. You can go to Apple Tunes Podcasts, and I think if you search under my name, there's about 200 talks still sitting there. You can listen to.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you so much everyone for coming, but most importantly, Octavio, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
Everyone's clapping.